Hi, this is Jim Peters with Responsible Hospitality Institute. I'm here to introduce the Tuesday Forum that was held on Tuesday, October 11th on the topic, Does Your City Need a Night Manager? A monthly event. It's the second Tuesday of the month and it's designed as an open format. It's not a webinar with presentations. It's an opportunity for people who come from different cities to focus on a topic or a series of topics, and those are synthesized into a summary. So it's a pretty informal gathering, but almost like a crowdsource opportunity. The topics for this particular session include: what challenges is your city facing to need a night manager? How do you believe a night manager can assist? What would be the job duties of a night manager? And what are the first priorities in your city that require the most attention? So I'm going to turn this over to the people who were involved in the breakout sessions, and they'll share the results of their group. Thank you, and I hope to see you again on a future Tuesday forum.
So we talked about a number of different things. We talked about some of the challenges that we face getting the position started. And one of it is just trying to get people to understand what the position actually does. A lot of times people have this conception in terms of what a nighttime economy manager or a nighttime mayor does. And then just elevating the profile and understanding the need for the work, because a lot of people don't understand the economic impact of the nighttime economy. So it's really important to start looking at an impact study. In Cleveland, they're starting to do that, but the key is trying to figure out what you include in that, because there's so many different things that are impacted by nightlife, not just the hospitality part of it, but other things, but trying to figure out where you go from there. And again, trying to really elevate the work and make people understand why it's an important part of any kind of structure in kind of the ecosystem of what's going on. And Marjorie stated again, collecting data is really important. And then we discussed kind of what are the job duties for the position. So once people actually have this position in place, what are some of the key roles and factors that they do? And Brian discussed how in Austin, sound was a really important factor, because a lot of times, especially when people are complaining about nightlife and entertainment, they call it noise, but it's really more sound and how you manage the sound and what's going on. A lot of us in this role, we kind of work with planning and policy. So it's working with others to develop planning issues and policies related to the nighttime economy. But it's also being a liaison. So it's being a liaison with other departments, it's being a liaison with neighborhood groups, and getting them to understand. And then it's advocacy. And so it's really advocating for those activities so people don't just understand it and kind of tolerate it, but that people really support it and champion it. And then trying to figure out how you, with that advocacy, get the resources that you need to make it work. We talked about, let's see, just dealing with the challenges and then just trying to build a path forward in terms of what you're doing. And then also connecting the businesses and getting the businesses to play a role. So it's not just about the organization, the government structures that are involved, but also getting the businesses themselves to build an alliance and understand what's going on. Then we also talked about kind of what are the priorities and why these positions were created and what are some of the initial priorities. And of course, safety is the number one. We talked about what was happening in Sacramento while we were at RHR when we had a very unfortunate shooting incident. We've had some others. And so safety is always a really key element, but it's not the lone element. Again, sound management is really important. Dealing with other violence that's related not just to guns. In Edmonton, they had an issue with a riot and how that impacted businesses being closed because they wanted to regulate it. So it's trying to address that as well. And then just compatibility issues when you have entertainment, whether it's sound or other things related to entertainment, it's also addressing those compatibility issues. And then trying to support the businesses themselves. And so Cleveland has put together some different issues. They're doing a land trust to try to give people opportunities. So when people want to open businesses, there's some place for them to do it. So there's a lot of different functions that a nighttime economy manager can play in terms of not only negating some of the negative impacts that seem to be related with nighttime economy, but also really seeing those opportunities and being an advocate and a liaison to really build up a really effective nighttime economy.
To start off, we had a bit of a conversation around sort of the motivation behind a nighttime manager. And we talked about, some cities, there might be more of a cultural sort of motivation towards it, bringing back some of that downtown vibrancy. And in other cases, as we've heard earlier, safety becomes a large motivator around it. The noise situation, we talked about, the need to coexist, and how through COVID, people really kind of got used to more quiet environments, not as much going on. And now, of course, we're bringing back arts and entertainment and cultural events and activities and things like that. And so you're learning how to sort of manage the noise and learning how to coexist. Interestingly enough, it was shared that I think it was New York actually has a sort of mediation service that they offer in communities, and kind of helping to manage that challenges that come up around the nighttime economy. And much like the first group, we talked about the need for this position, or the role of this position as more of a liaison and a connector for businesses, and how to support them. And really, fascinating, we'll get into the governance piece, but a fascinating conversation around the governance piece. But we also talked a little bit about nighttime ambassadors. And one individual in particular is an ambassador in the community, and how he's kind of the boots on the ground, really connecting in the community, seeing what's happening with people, whether, it's services that they need, more community services, to actual infrastructure issues, things like that can be reported back to the city. So I thought that was a very interesting model to learn and hear from. And he works a lot around different social issues with the unhoused. But really being that, it was about being that connector for businesses, and being able to advocate, and having one place that can kind of help to manage and oversee nighttime activities and make it a little bit easier.
It's great to see some familiar faces here, and to also to get to know others. As I was sharing briefly with the group, I think it's really important to understand that different cities have different needs and different motivations to create nighttime governance models, and that it's not a formula that has to be replicated, but that it needs to take into account local history, local regulations, and local interests. And I pointed out that a few years ago, Mireille Milan, the former night mayor of Amsterdam, and I did a study. It was a qualitative study that we did in an academic study that was published. We tried to understand what kinds of nighttime governance models exist by conducting an online survey, in which we asked several questions to the existing night mayors at the time. It was like around 45 people from all over the world. We asked them about what kind of funding they had, where their office was situated, we also looked at demographics, how many men, how many women, ages. We looked at the permanence question, if these roles will remain over time. But one important thing that we were able to conclude was that there were two main types of nighttime governance models: those that are situated inside City Hall as permanent or more permanent offices, departments within the administration, and those that are situated outside as independent organizations, foundations, NGOs that have no direct connection with local government, but they do receive public funding as well as private funding for to exercise their mandate. And also I mentioned that it's interesting to see how time has gone by, and also with the pandemic, we've seen new forms of nighttime governance emerge. So it's not only these two types, but also some hybrid types. We see now new commissions, councils that are emerging around the world, and how these entities bring together different members of these ecosystems. So not only public officials and people, representatives of the nighttime economy, so owners of bars, restaurants, but also other actors such as prevention groups, resident groups. And if you there's many examples to this, but I pointed out the example of Paris, where in Paris there is a deputy mayor that is responsible for the night, but also there's a Conseil de la Nuit that is responsible for a nighttime council that meets twice a year and involves all these members of the ecosystem. So it's really interesting to see that there are different types and that types are changing. Also to what Tina was mentioning before, I think it's really important to see how mandates sometimes change. We can put together a list of the duties that a night mayor has to do in a particular city, but these duties can change. They can be affected by crisis, like external crisis like COVID, or internal crisis like an economic situation. But also a city can realize that maybe there's a very specific area that needs more focus. Maybe it's a cultural aspect, or maybe it has from a sociological perspective. But it's interesting to take into account how these duties and mandates can change, and these offices vary based on that.
And I'm sure all of you touched on it, but like like how to get this, boulder up over the hill, which I think is really vital. And so there's a whole bunch of things, and like we've heard, safety issues and crime, and the somewhat knee-jerk reflexive response to a city having nightlife safety problems of, oh, let's hire somebody and go fix it. And heard a little bit about like Tina's journey and how Peter and her created something, and then the mayor decided it was maybe something else based on timing. So her challenge is going to be how to do the things she intends to do while still sort of outwardly facing the things that the mayor asked or said to everyone else she was going to do. So so crime and safety is really one impetus. The other one that can be useful, and people shouldn't like ignore it, is this idea like of a politician taking this on as their own project and saying, not just for the like response of what do we do about this crime issue, but also like, I want to be this champion of nightlife. And we certainly see that in certain cities where like legislators and or mayors think it's just cool. It's like a cool thing to do. It's a hip thing that's going on all over the place. So I don't want to miss this. And I think if anyone has a mayor that's like excited about doing the newest stuff on the curve, right? Like jump on that, because there's nothing wrong. Like if you can get it done that way, get it done that way, because it really doesn't matter. Like Andrea said, it can be one thing and then things will happen and it will move and shift and turn to the issue at hand. And it will, somebody said, building the plane while it flies kind of thing, which is sometimes the way these jobs are. Also then impetus around development and like, right, from a sort of planning perspective, which I think is like probably healthier to come up with this idea of needing somebody to think about nightlife when there's a lot of nightlife development happening, whether it's building arenas, right, or new areas with mixed use. And so that's really smart and forward thinking, but typically not how we see this happening. And the last one is was expressed that business owners in most cities feel like they're not part of the conversation. And so many times people want to bring forward a way for those business operators to have a voice, whether it's in government, right, or with politics, like however this stuff happens to them and they don't feel like they're engaged. And so this is a way to engage those folks. And certainly lastly, like Sergeant House knows, the idea that nobody else works at night and the police get like all the shit rolls downhill, if you will, is real. And the notion that you could spot stuff before it turned into bigger stuff if somebody's paying attention all the time, so that you can create teams, interagency teams, you can create hospitality groups, like lots of ways in which this position can sort of help other folks be eyes and ears out there, so that the police aren't where everything ends up all the time.
Hi, this is Jim Peters again. I want to thank you for participating in this video presentation. Please go to our website, sociablecity.org, to learn more about the different programs and upcoming events that we have. Thanks again. Bye.